Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Hi, this is Terry Farrell, and you're listening to Regular Joe's podcast.
I'm John Billingsley, and you are listening to the Regular Joe's podcast.
Hi, this is Roxanne Dawson, and you're listening to the Regular Joe's podcast.
My name is David Gerald, and you're listening to the Regular Joe's podcast.
My name is Jason Isaacs, and you're listening to the Regular Joe's podcast.
Welcome to the Regular Joe's podcast. I'm Dave Pisani.
I'm Barry Kay.
I'm Todd Pleasant.
And I'm Brian Mix.
Hey, Brian's here.
Brian's back.
Hey, guys.
Brian's back, and he brought friends.
So we just met and recorded with people who are infamous, if you're a Star Trek fan, Bjo and John Trimble. I think we may have. Did we mention it on the show
Yeah,
before?
a couple weeks ago.
We may have. So we're going to play that in a little while. They're awesome. If you don't know them, look them up. They basically saved Star Trek.
And if you're a Star Trek fan now, you have them to thank for it.
That's right. And in a huge way, reshaped fan culture. So it's very interesting.
And Brian's known them for a long time. And, you know, we're like, wait, you're with who? You're at a party with who? How do you know these people? And then he's like, I've known them for 30 years. And
you'll hear some of it in the interview, but like they were doing the, sci-fi and nerd culture convention thing decades before it was
in the 50s.
In the 50s. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
And again, but then they harnessed it, and it's an amazing story. And if you heard, even if you have heard it, it's hearing it from them themselves, because other people have recounted it many times. But here you get a chance to hear it right from them. It's great.
Yeah, it was just great. So before we play that, we do have to mention someone who we've mentioned on this show numerous times. The great John Saxon passed away a couple days ago. I know certainly Todd and I are fans to the point where I have a drawing that we'll put up in the thing.
Yeah, we'll take a picture.
I think we were at a Outback someplace.
Okay,
and you drew that picture.
Our mutual regard for John Saxon,
which is probably. And what pisses me off? The original is in my office,
is that
which
right?
I haven't been in 4 months. God,
yeah, it feels like 4 years.
I actually recreated that. I drew that for Jason on the board on the whiteboard in our office this week, and showed him the caricature of John Saxon. John Saxon, by the way, had the best in like the 60s and 70s, had the best set of eyebrows in Hollywood. Okay, and I mean, it was just like. He looked angry all the time, permanently, but it was awesome. He just had this great look. And whether it be in, the pilots that he did for Roddenberry, when he was Maskatron, $6 Million Man.
Maskatron.
Certainly Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon, which is, I guess, the thing that he's now known the most for.
Yeah, but we love him.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
His IMDb page was just awesome.
So Dave made an observation one time, which I actually wasn't certain of, and I did some research and I verified he was correct, that John Saxon has had the distinction of having more movies in his IMDb with AKA titles than any other actor. Now, that is the true mark of a B-movie actor, when you're in a film that's released under more than one title, when they just send it out as a second pass on DVD on VHS or re-release
or
it for Sunday afternoon.
in different countries, because he did
in different countries.
A lot of things in Italy.
You go down there, there's dozens. I mean, he's got a huge IMDb, but there's dozens and dozens of films that were re-released under different titles. He made a lot of interesting films. This past year, I watched Queen of Blood, which was terrible. And but his
career went from the 50s straight through
absolutely.
To
and he just,
like the 2000s. So
yeah,
and he had
we will do a show on him if it's not in the next couple.
Will. Yep.
Next week it'll be in the next couple of weeks, because we certainly owe that, because we've threatened it so many times. But rest in peace.
He'll get the tribute that he's due.
Yes. So with that, we'll go right into Brian's intros, the Trimbles, and let's hear that.
Here we are with John and Bjo Trimble, famously the creators of the writing campaign to save Star Trek, and much, much more, which we're going to get into today. John and Bjo, thanks for being here with us.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, it's great to be invited.
So I'd love to start at the beginning of Star Trek anyway, and can you tell us how you met Gene Roddenberry?
Okay.
Oh.
You have to watch this because we'll just talk forever. But short story, I started something years ago called the Futuristic Fashion Show, and it was people designing and yada yada. So you look it up. And the girl who was handling the one that was going to be at TriCon.
Oh, yes, 1966 in Cleveland.
Yes, managed to get appendicitis 2 days before we left, and handed me this pile of paper and said, you get to do it. So that would be fine, except that the people at TriCon, well, not all of them, but the one we worked with, were, they were sort of pills. And this one little guy comes up and says, we don't even want you here, but you get exactly 1 hour. 1 hour will close you down. Fine. So now I'm the girls are practicing on the runway and so on.
Now, at the same time, we're also running the science fiction fantasy art show at the Worldcon.
Yep.
So this was Worldcon, and it just went to different cities every year.
Yeah. Still does.
Still does. Yes.
Today it opened in New Zealand.
It's probably safe to be in New Zealand now, but
yeah. At any rate,
this was in Chicago.
No, Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland. You're right. Sorry.
So
TriCon.
We're doing this. We're wearing two hats, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Where she is, I'm doing art show stuff, and so she's got this fashion show with, I don't know how many entries. 20.
But anyway, so I'll take over from here because I love him, but he takes too long. So
I feel the same about Tom.
But we've been married 60 years as of July 9th. So.
Oh,
congratulations.
But so meanwhile, back at the runway, the same little character comes and says, we have a famous producer that would like to put 3 of his movie costumes in your fashion show. And I said, no, you've already taken me down to an hour. I can't possibly put 3 more costumes in it. Well, we've already promised him. Well, then go unpromise him. I didn't do any promising. So he trots off, and a few minutes later, I have this deep voice say, "Are you Bjo Trimble?" And I said, "Yes." And I turned around, and I'm on a runway about 1.5 feet off the floor. I'm not very tall. But on that runway, I was just about eye to eye with this rather good-looking guy. And I thought, I don't even know who this is. And it was Gene Roddenberry. And he offered to take me for coffee. And we sat and talked. So 20 minutes later, that silver-tongued devil had talked his way into the fashion show. That was helped by the fact that he'd hired professional models, and they, seeing a holiday, job going down the drains, if I didn't let him show them, were offered to help, start the show and run the show and so on backstage. And I said, sure, and it all worked out.
So tell him which costumes he brought.
He brought 2 costumes from iMud, which went over very well with the audience. Well,
female costumes.
Yeah. And
there's not much to those costumes.
No, there was a lot of girl there. And then the cute little cross over the front jumper suit from What Are Little Girls Made Of?
The android, Sherry
Also,
Jackson, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't notice this, but the big android the male was wearing exactly the same outfit, only with a shirt.
No one cared, though.
Wasn't
that Lurch? Wasn't that the guy who played Lurch?
Yeah,
It might have
was
been.
Lurch.
That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
By the way, was a charming soul. We lost him many years ago, but
Yeah.
he was a really neat person to talk to.
So
But,
this was.
anyway, so Gene said exactly the sort of thing that, if you've been around Hollywood very long, he says, well, when we get back to Hollywood, if you're ever in town, give us a call. We'll go do lunch. Yeah. You know, my mother sewed costumes for Warner Brothers. I mean, I had heard lines like that all my life. But we went back to California. We lived in Oakland at the time. And when John got had a job assignment down in LA, and I said, let's call this guy's bluff. So we did, and he picked up the phone and he said, "Come on over to Paramount for."
He didn't pick up the phone right away. His secretary said, "Who's calling?" And she said, "Bjo Trimble." And then he said, "Bjo Trimble," and he picked up the phone on hearing the name. So,
yeah. And
so the show was before this. The convention was before the show had aired, actually, right?
Right.
Yes.
The convention took place, over Labor Day weekend. And the first episode, the first showing of Star Trek was September 8th. So it was the following week.
And you they showed some episodes at the convention. Did you see them while you were there, or you still hadn't?
Oh yeah. Well, everybody there had to go see that because, we, as science fiction fans, we'd always been promised that we were going to finally have a grown-up, mature show, and then it would devolve into another kiddie show. There's another alien, let's kill it. Dr. Smith throwing fits on whatever planet they landed on. And
we love to talk about the carrot people on Lost in Space. Lost in Space started out great, but then there were carrot people.
So we were promised a lot, and here's another producer telling us what a wonderful show he had, and so everybody was kind of doubtful, and he showed us 3 episodes.
Yeah, showed us the cage, and the second pilot, which was Where No Man's Gone Before.
Yep.
And
did we get to see the?
Was it Charlie X?
Charlie X would have been the third one.
I think so. Yeah.
I think those are the first 3 that they were shown together. Yeah.
You guys are asking us to go back some 50 years, and we're already in our 80s already.
Yeah. Well, no,
you're doing a great job.
We're talking we're talking about a significant moment in history. We've actually read about this. So you were there.
You guys were there.
You certainly ask us. We may not always remember, but you can certainly ask.
Yeah.
Okay, so you called Gene Roddenberry's
fun stuff.
You called Gene Roddenberry's bluff, and he invites you down to the studio. And what did you say?
Well, he asked us the silliest question in the universe: would you like to see the sets?
How much after this was? How long after was this roughly from when you had met him in the? Had you seen a bunch of episodes and started to like the show, kind of thing?
About 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, I don't think it was that
may
long.
not have been that long.
Anyway,
but you had been watching on television and sort of liking what you saw.
The fans had been writing in and asking if they could visit the sets, and of course, Gene said yes until Desilu caught him.
Yeah.
And he was informed by the legal department that he couldn't do that because, of course, they weren't set up for guests, and lawsuits could ensue from that point. So.
And the insurance people took a dim view of it.
Sure.
But at any rate, we had sort of, become people that were okayed no matter what. So, and I think that harkened back to the fact that we did let him put his costumes in the fashion show.
Do you remember what episodes were being filmed while you were there?
Not specifically, except for one. The one where we found out, it was a second season show, where we found out that the show was going to be canceled.
Well, that was much later.
Oh, you were on set when you found that out?
Yeah.
Well, they already knew it, but it was just still a rumor, So we'd seen several episodes, parts of episodes being filmed, but this particular occasion, and let me explain, the set had always been, crew and what have you, and the actors had all been very light, very friendly, a cheerful sort of thing. They'd come back off doing a scene and they'd sit in their chairs and they'd chat back and forth, and it was very all kind of an up feeling. This particular time, it was changed entirely. And it was part of the deadly years.
Mm-hmm.
And we were seeing the scene where Kirk has been cured by
McCoy's magic pill.
Yeah, McCoy's magic elixir, whatever it is.
Adrenaline, yeah.
And made, had their youth returned. And he jumps down off the upper part of the bridge to the lower part and grabs his back like they're still in the...
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yes.
Yeah. Well, we got to watch Shatner do this about a dozen times. We're not sure if the director wasn't happy with him doing it or if he was having him on.
I'm sure it was the latter.
But at any rate, every time somebody'd come off their scene, they'd come in and they'd just slump down in their chairs.
We kept asking people what's wrong. Crew wouldn't talk to us. The people, well. And finally, you go to the Radar O'Reilly of studios, which is craft services.
Mm-hmm. They always know what's going on.
And they, believe me, that's their stock in trade, is that they know what's happening. And so the one on duty there said, well, there's not been an official word. But and later on, many months after after we ran the Safe Star Trek campaign, we had an NBC person say, well, nobody ever sent any word. And I said, you guys forget something. And that is that the foot soldiers learn about a lot of things before the generals do.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't understand. I told you've never been in the military. But it's really true, And so, yeah. Have we already segued to the
before you segue to the letter campaign, let me just jump back. So you had been on the set a number of times through the first two seasons, and had you been doing anything? I know you wrote the concordance at some point. Was that later on? Was that during this whole process? Were you sort of involved in the show from a fan basis in any way?
The first two seasons were pretty much in the can when I realized that we were in San Francisco at the time, that a fellow SCA member was keeping very copious notes. And she didn't plan on doing anything with them. And I asked her about that, and she said, and it turned out that she had a serious limitation of interest, which always bothers me with people. Because she was interested in her church, in Star Trek, in the SCA, and that was about it. And so I said, well, give me the notes. I'll fill it in. We'll see what we can do about getting something published. So the first time was a fan publication.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that the last season was a separate fan publication was that we couldn't get the scripts anymore.
So you were getting scripts to take notes in addition to
Gene
seeing
was
the
giving
shows.
scripts. Oh, sure,
And that was all through the first couple seasons that you had visited.
Yeah.
How many times did you think you visited the set, roughly?
Well, we couldn't guess because we lived in Oakland, and whenever John was going down there to LA, then of course we would call Gene and go on the set. And after a while, it would be sending us on over to the set and just walk in and say hi.
Mm-hmm.
But, and we found that almost everybody was very friendly to us too.
Mm-hmm.
So Gene didn't have you there in any kind of official capacity. It was more just guest of Gene and hanging out on the set?
More guests of Gene, and we both knew how to behave on a set.
Yeah.
That's
you don't
important.
stand around and shuffle your feet because there's enough grit on the floor that, and that sounds like thunder on a mic. So
it's like anything else. If you act like you belong and you know how to carry yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, and we don't go over and hit the crafts table either. That's that's the other.
That's rookie. That's a rookie mistake. Yeah.
So, but we found that the first actor we actually talked to was DeForest Kelley, and it turns out that since he and his wife Caroline didn't have any children, they had pets, and so immediately the wallet comes out and we get to see all the dogs and the turtles and any number of other creatures.
I don't think he had pictures of the fish, but other than that,
but it was and because we had pets, then we had something to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Something very special. But yeah.
So the fan concordance was done in sort of after the second season while you were doing the whole letter writing scenario.
To a degree, yeah.
Go ahead, Brian. I know.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell us about the letter writing campaign and how. So you hear at the end of the second season they might be canceled, and a light bulb goes on.
Well, all of that is John's fault.
We left the studio after finding this out, and we're driving back to Oakland from LA, and Interstate 5 didn't exist yet. So we're going up the Central Valley, and we're over on the highway that goes up between 99 and 101. I can't remember the number on it. But we're on that highway, and we're talking about the whole thing and saying how
sad it was that people felt so bad and so on. And then John says
I said, it's a shame it's going to be canceled. It seems to me that there ought to be something we could do about that.
Oh boy.
Now I should have known better than to say that to her.
Famous last words.
And I said, yes. Well, I had no idea what we could do, but and
we spent the rest of the trip noodling out what to do.
There was not any precedent for us to ask. We even asked the big letter writing company in Hollywood. But anyway, I asked them, and they said they didn't know of any. So we had no template to work from. So we worked out one of our own. I went around to secretaries both on studio and off and asked them, what is it about a letter that makes you either ground file it or file it under nut or answer it yourself or make sure your boss sees it. And I wrote all of those up and, things to
do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Points to make.
And don't spend 18 pages telling everybody how much you love Spock. Just if you can't put it on one page, then, you need to rethink your letter writing. And for heaven's sake, do not do it in purple perfumed ink on yellow lined paper. And, things like this, which seemed not now today perfectly rational things, but in those days there wasn't any.
Type the letter if you possibly can.
Yeah.
And mail it in a business envelope.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is what people will tell you today you should do to successfully contact your congressperson.
Yeah.
That they totally ignore form letters. They want to see something short, concise, to the point, and clearly from you. Mm-hmm. And I've been part of letter writing campaigns for a lot of political things over the years, and they send us guidelines, just like you're talking about, where mention this point, but put it in your own words and put a stamp on it.
Well, I would hope that was our set of letter writing things.
Yeah.
When this letter writing campaign, which was not going to succeed, everybody told us that. When it did succeed, everybody wanted to know what we'd done, and the letter writing part of it was
we would ask people to write a letter, making these points, and send in their letter, and then copy all this information we'd sent them, and send it to 10 friends,
and ask
each of them to write a letter, and copy the information and send it to 10 friends. So on.
You invented the pyramid scheme, is what you're saying.
Yes. Well, no, actually,
Ponzi invented that, but
the thing is that people, we discovered some people who didn't write their letter were so guilt-ridden that they would ask 20 people.
Oh, wow.
And nowadays it's even easier because we have the internet, which means we can reach, I don't know how many friends you've got on the internet, but right now John and I could reach at least 7,000 people, and that's not including the clubs.
Sure.
And, so, that's...
But you did it without any of that technology.
That's the thing.
That's the amazing
part. So the
of it.
mechanism was fan magazines or regular magazines and
getting mailing lists.
You got mailing lists.
Were fans put out things called fanzines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You did them. It was just pre-offset era. It wasn't pre-offset, but it was before the handy, take it down in your local quick.
You're talking like a mimeograph kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
Crank the handle.
The purple ones? I remember the
No, that's Ditto machine.
Yeah.
This was actually mimeograph stuff.
Now the Ditto is the purple thing you can get. 4 copies and 20 totally unreadable copies off of it now.
That's so true.
Yep.
But you could. But by the way, if you ran out of Ditto fluid, you could use vodka. And we know this because somebody arrived late at a fanzine party, and he walked in with a bottle of vodka just as we ran out of, and realized Ditto it was fluid. Too late to buy Ditto fluid anywhere, and we used his vodka.
He was very unhappy about that.
Wow.
Well, but
it was cheapo brand, old toenail brand.
Anyway, we got just as many copies out of that as we did with everything.
There you go.
But we worked on it.
So that's how. So you got it out in fanzines and.
Yeah.
Well, we knew it was going to be a little dicey to try to get it only in fanzines because, frankly, fans have somewhat erratic publication, publishing schedule.
Sure.
So we essentially mailed out all this stuff. We'd have mailing parties where people would come over and they'd collate letters and fold them and put them in envelopes, and
we burned up 3 little electrical folding machines
until we discovered fan labor and put them to work at it.
Yeah, crowdsourcing. Yes.
Now our kids went around collating stuff, for the things we were sending out, and
for years afterward, if we're going to throw a party, when we invited people to a party, they'd say, "Is this a real party or a work party?"
Well, that's great. So I have a question. The number of letters is very much is reported all different numbers. Have you ever gotten any sort of official number in terms of letters they received?
Here's the thing. Even in those days, even big companies sent all of their computing stuff out to an outside company. And so no matter what NBC said, they actually were not counting their mail.
Okay.
Now, a young man from the computer company,
that was hired by NBC to do that.
Yep.
That he came out and told Gene Roddenberry that they had processed 1 million letters. Now, did they, or was he angling for a job, or what? We'll never know. We don't know. Gene was thrilled, so he wasn't.
Whatever it was overwhelming enough that the studio had to take notice, though.
Yes.
Well, a big part of this too was changing the perception of who the viewer was, because it was they had this idea in their head that this was something that 12-year-olds watched, and they were picturing the Lost in Space audience.
No, we asked teachers, if you had a lawful right to a letterhead, use it.
Yeah.
And so they got a
we had the thing picked up by Mensa.
Oh wow!
By the employees in the Kodak company. It showed up in their newsletter.
All sorts of organizations that weren't kiddie organizations or fan organizations picked up on it and ran it in their magazines
So it was one of the first real viral campaigns.
It was the first real viral campaign. I mean, everybody has modeled theirs after this in one way or another.
We've never refused sending out the information on how to run a campaign, and immediately people will say, "Well, that won't work." Well, okay. And try to convince you, because it's like the Washington Post phoned us and wanted to interview us about the campaign when it would look like it was going to succeed, and they said, "Well, how are you doing this?" And we told them about the rule of 10. And the reporter said, "Well, that wouldn't work." And I said, "You may be right," and hung up. And John said, "Well, he called me a liar. Why would I talk? Why would you want to talk to somebody who is a naysayer in the first place?"
Yeah, true.
Get those kind of people out of your life. But
the proof was in the pudding. It did work. So
can you talk I'm sorry. Can you talk a little bit about Gene Roddenberry's double secret involvement in the letter writing campaign?
Yeah. Well, okay. We told Gene he couldn't get involved because NBC would blame him. They did anyway, but I mean, at least they wouldn't have proof, right? He couldn't get involved. He couldn't, even give us money. We got most of our funding from the fans. Well, here I am telling a producer he can't get in there and produce, right? They don't deal well with that sort of thing. So Gene, no, we're still up in Oakland for most of this. And so a bunch of guys over at UCLA, no, Caltech, pardon me.
Well, and some from UCLA as well.
And put together a march on NBC Burbank.
Oh, wow.
And it was absolutely not, hostile at all. Everybody was just there. They were having fun. They were waving big signs. But that was it. Well, this mysterious stranger in black leathers on a motorcycle appeared. And nobody was supposed to know it was Gene.
And
he had got himself involved, of course, and everybody gladly greeted him. But yeah, these kind of things. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Well, he toward the end of it. Now we moved back to Southern California, partway through this whole thing, and toward the last push of mailings, a Greenblatt's catering truck pulls up out front, and the guy comes in and says, "Are you John and Bjo Trimble?" And we said yes, and he said, "Here, I've got a whole catered lunch for our crew."
And I don't know where they found out how many people we had in the house, but it adequately fed 25 people.
Oh, wow.
So, and we asked, but of course they couldn't tell us who had said it. Well,
Right.
you know who said it. For But
so once it was all said and done, and the show got renewed,
exactly.
I'm assuming you guys.
One of the crazy things about this, later we met an NBC official, and he said, "Well, we never got more than 50,000 letters," which was supposed to be a big put down. And I said, "Wow, do you know that if we can change an entire network's mind with only 50,000 letters, think how powerful we really are."
Yeah.
Which wasn't what he wanted to hear at all.
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. Was once it was all said and done and the show was renewed, what was the I mean, I'm assuming you'd been back to the set after that. So what was sort of the cast and crew and studio reaction?
Oh, actually, we didn't get to go back to the set after that because they kicked Gene upstairs to executive producer. It didn't mean in those days what it means these days. And they put in
Fred
Freiberger.
Yeah, Fred Freiberger as producer, and they.
But the script writer was.
Arthur Singer was the script supervisor.
He arrives into his office with the shirt open, practically to the belly button, all these gold chains, and and the first thing he does is call me Chickie.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Like, how would you like to have your throat?
We looked at this crew and we thought, oh shit. It's this is going to be the nail in the coffin.
Well, Freiberger had actually not seen much of Star Trek, if anything, and he watched some shows, and he said, "All right, this is a drama. There'll be no more humor, no more comedy." And it was like, wait a minute. Balance was one of the things about Star Trek, So, but one important thing too that we need to add for the campaign. One of the secretaries said, "Well, if you're going to push for something, hit him in the pocketbook." And I went, "Whoa, what are we talking about?" And she said, "Well, for a TV network, they work on sponsors." Yay! And so we would send out lists of the sponsors to people to contact. And that worked better than you would believe, because they began phoning their local station as well as NBC saying, "Why are we paying for some time here? And people are unhappy with us."
Yeah, that's a huge reaction.
And then NBC phoned us and said, "Would you stop telling people that?" And we thought, "We gotcha."
Yeah.
So,
how long did the whole process take? I mean, I know there's not a lot of time between seasons,
no,
but
we didn't have any time at all. It was
probably
3
about
4 months.
3 or 4 months. Yeah.
And especially in the days of no internet and all through the mail.
Internet, it's all obviously typewriters and mimeograph machines.
Yeah.
When we talk about this at conventions, we'll say, it's all done with mimeograph on typewriters and mimeograph machines. Google those.
Yeah,
you get a lot of blank stares.
Yeah, exactly.
And people don't believe that we really did it. I don't know how they thought the whole thing happened, but
we used the same campaign, same basic campaign to get the first shuttle named Enterprise.
Oh, that's true.
That was going to be something I was going to ask you about.
Was kind of shoved off on us, so we didn't start that one.
Just for our listeners, and just if you don't realize, and if you're a fan of Star Trek, and if you're not a fan of Star Trek, you shouldn't be listening. They made 2 seasons of Star Trek. Most shows do not go into syndication.
That's correct.
Unless there's at least 3 seasons. They need enough shows. In this instance, there were 79 shows.
Yeah.
Had the Trimbles not done this, Star Trek as we know it today, with a dozen series and
would not
20
be what we know
movies,
it.
would not exist.
It would have died a 2-season show.
It would
Exactly.
have just
lost to
It'd
time
be
like so many other shows from
Lancelot
the 60s.
Link's Secret Chimp is what it would be. No one's ever heard of that.
If we're lucky, it would have been Time Tunnel. It would have been something that people fondly remember.
It shows
but
up
not
on
that many
TV
people.
Land or something like
Right.
that, but no other. Yeah, no, I totally.
So
I mean, this is why when Brian mentioned you guys a couple of weeks ago, we were like, these are our heroes. I mean, he kind of name dropped the two of you, and it was like,
wait a
really?
second, what? He sent a picture while we were. Where was it?
You know them?
Like, how are you? How is this possible?
I literally wrote a term paper about this in a TV journalism class in college.
Yeah. So.
Oh gosh, I'd like to read it.
So, I wish I still had it.
Yeah.
But no, like Todd's saying, like when
ago,
he told us that he knew you guys, we were like, wait a minute, those guys are like rock stars. So we really wanted to meet you guys.
Well, and we did it so badly because we didn't get anything from Paramount.
Yeah.
And now, if we got 1% of 1%.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A piece of the action, a very small piece of the action.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a good episode.
Oh well,
but you have our undying gratitude, and it's one of these things that a lot of people try a lot of things in their lifetime and are remembered for good and bad things. This is an amazing accomplishment that you did, and generations have been the recipient of what you accomplished. It's phenomenal.
For sure.
So,
well, and you mentioned the space shuttle, and so I was a little too young to watch Star Trek in its first incarnation. I mean, I wasn't even born when it aired, but I was the right age when the space shuttle program came along, and when they named it Enterprise, and I remember watching it on TV when the whole cast and the whole crew were there, and as a 9-year-old kid who was into Star Trek, that was everything. So even if you didn't initiate that one, the fact that you guys saw that one through to the end, that as a 9-year-old, that made my life that year when they named that ship Enterprise.
I'm so glad. Well, they didn't know what to do with us because we weren't considered VIPs. And so they were trying to figure out at the big reception the night before out at Edwards.
P.S. guys, the Trimbles were there for that.
Yeah.
Enterprise
okay.
The crew. Yeah.
Well, John wasn't, but I was.
Okay.
He had to work. But I got out on the auspices of Jerry Purnell and Larry Niven, whom we know.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And where they were outraged that we'd not been invited, and so they got us invited. So then they took me out since John had to work, and so at the party they were going around like, "Who's she? What is she doing here?" And only a few people knew who in the world we were. So I hope this little secretary or whoever she was got a huge raise, because she came up to me and she said, "How would you like to have a press pass instead of a VIP pass?" And a couple of our newspaper people that we know said, "Take the press pass, we get more booze."
That's great.
So I took the press pass, and I had a ball. We were practically under the wing vein when they hauled that thing out, and it was wonderful. I wasn't in any of the fancy pictures. It wasn't necessary for me to be there, but I knew I was there, and now you know.
Yeah.
And the press pass carried forward.
Oh, yes.
Because it got us over to JPL to see the Jupiter and Saturn flybys.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And since we were, again, in the press room, which was right off in those days in the lobby coming in, and the guests would sometimes come in and wander around and meet us and so on. And we got to meet Dr. Tombaugh.
Clyde Tombaugh, the discoverer of Pluto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was wonderful. I went down, I phoned Vroman's bookstore in Pasadena and said, "Do you have his book?" They said yes. I said, how many copies? And they told me, and I said, hold them all. I'll be right down. And I went down, and he autographed them, and again, see, now, if I knew how to do this, I'd be rich. But did I charge extra? No, I just said, this is what the book cost.
Yeah.
Throw in $1 for the gas. And that was it. But, yeah, so we still have our autographed copy of that book.
Oh, Bjo, you were also in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, if I recall.
I was just going to go to what happened after
Again,
Star Trek.
John had to work. His boss was really
Never mind.
And I wasn't going to say anything. Anyway, so, but yes, and the reason for that was the director, because he said, we kept talking about 430 people or so and you don't see any of them. You just see a few people walking up and down the passageway. Well,
that's all they can afford.
And so he said, I want to see more people. And they had this gathering of the crew, so that Kirk could explain the Megillah from outer space that they had to go.
Who's going to eat the universe?
They had to go chase down.
Eat you.
And so about 150 of us, because you're allowed in those days to go on the street and find people who fit a type.
So Bjo gets a call from the Star Trek offices, and they say, do you know anybody who'd like to be in the motion picture? And she says, is this a trick question?
Do you know anyone who wouldn't like to be?
And they said, don't ask anybody out of state, because Gene didn't want to disappoint people. And we're not going to automatically, we can't, because the Extras Guild won't let us, but we can't just automatically, cast someone.
In those days, there was both the Screen Actors Guild and the Screen Extras Guild.
Yes. Yep.
They're now one combined guild. But Gene had gotten an okay from the Extras Guild that if he hired X number of extras, he could go on the street for the rest of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened. And of course, people told their friends from out of state, and of course they flew in. I mean, first they're fans, come on. And so, but it was, they had set up some bleachers in a large studio and soundstage, and it was a cattle call. They were calling down about 20 people at a time, and the makeup person and the costumer and a couple of other people
and Robert Wise,
of course, would walk down the row, and it was just like real Hollywood. You had no recourse on the decision. It would be yes, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, and now instead of going home as the extras would do, all of the fans who didn't got cast went back up to the bleachers to see who else got in and to cheer them on.
Oh, I thought you said they went to go back through the thing again.
Get back in line.
That's nicer. What you said is nicer.
No, it didn't work that way. But the people on, doing all of this were looking up going, what is happening? Who are these people? But they sent Gene out for dinner with someone important so that he couldn't be there, because they knew he would say, well, I know this person doesn't fit the body part or the whatever, but he's just been such a great fan, and they just didn't want to deal with that. So, but John and I would have been, as many of the people from Gene's office and so on, would have been automatically put in. However, if you've seen, well, you don't see me. I'm not the person in the front row. I know there's a little short, in those days, brown-haired lady, and she's holding the hand of the little Vulcan in the white uniform. That is Mrs. Robert Wise.
Oh,
okay.
Little Vulcan is Joanne Christie, and now Joanne Nolan, and she called me the morning, in the morning. We were supposed to be there at 6, and she said, I can't do this. I can't. I said, do you know how many fans will throttle you on sight if you pass up a chance to be in the movie? and they'll know because I'm going to tell them. I'll be here. So she came, and she was so frightened, and Mrs. Robert Wise held her hand and told her it wasn't frightening. And there she is in the front row. Wow. Now, you can find, pardon me, we have so much going on in some house
remodeling stuff.
Yeah, that it's very dusty. Anyway, where was I?
We can say there's a picture of you and Shatner I see in the online.
If you're looking at the whole group that's facing Shatner, and divide it in half and go to your right just a little bit. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right looking at it. So it's.
I had that same thing when I was in the military. Fortunately, the Navy didn't do a lot of marching. Anyway, I am about a quarter of the space, of the space in, and most of the way in back. And I am, you can just barely see me. I'm in a white uniform, and I'm behind the tallest extra in the world. I'm only 5'2", so
and you can actually in the photograph see
there's about this much of me, you know. Yeah. And he kept saying, "Am I in your way?" And I said, "Honey, you need the FaceTime. I don't. Just go for it, you know, because it didn't matter if I was there. It was fun.
That's all that you need. Yeah.
We started at 6 a.m. Well, you know how early we had to get up to be there because the gates were going to close at 6. And so they have any stragglers. And we worked. We was going to film for 2 days, and then Mr. Wise said, "You know, if we go a few more hours today,
we can get it all in the can."
Well, everybody who wasn't an extra or us was going to get time and a half for this. So they didn't have any objection. And we were just thrilled to be there. So 11:35, we broke from Paramount. My feet hurt clear up to my hat brim. Mm-hmm. But, oh my, what a day we had, you know. And they had pre-made the uniforms, which is why there were, you know, certain specifications. They were made for women 5'5" to 5'6", and
5'4" to 5'6".
Yeah, and so if you saw me anywhere else besides the back of everybody, you would see the only wrinkle uniform, you know, it's sort of wrinkled down, and that's me. So David Gerald, on the other hand, looked superb. So
did you try to take it, or did they take it back from you? The uniform
away from us, yeah. They were also made of ski material.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And if you've never worn that stuff as a full suit, it's really interesting. First, you sweat like a pig, but secondly, you felt like that if you bent over or sat down, you were just going to snap. And all the zippers were in back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you were going to take a potty break, you took Brent. And David Gerald said, "Well, I have to go potty. Does anybody want to come with me and help unzip me?" 3 girls volunteered, and I thought, "Oh, honey," but he hadn't come out of the closet then.
I was just going to say, yeah, we met him.
We interviewed
years
David
ago.
We actually interviewed David.
He's a character.
Okay, well, you know, and we never felt it was fair to out somebody. If they come out when they're ready.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we had a fan in England one time say to us about George. She was the head of George's fan club in England. She said, "We all know we said, honey, he'll come out when he's ready to."
Yeah, exactly.
A very different time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, for sure.
Well, but you know, if you're in Hollywood, you really see this all the time. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, there was also a time when there was a public persona and a private persona, and you know, and there was actually more. There's a lot more respect for that line at one time.
Yeah.
Too.
Yes.
That line doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like George just never felt there was a need to come out until there was so many anti-gay things going on that felt that his name as a celebrity would make a difference in speaking up, and it sure did.
Yeah,
and it did,
absolutely.
and it does, and it did. And my son's gay, and I'm very glad he was able to grow up in a very different world.
Yeah.
And you know, it's we're very fortunate. Time has changed, and times have changed. And but like I said, it is people like George, and they're coming out when they did. They made that world possible. So
yeah.
I'm going to switch gears just a little, but to later Star Trek. So, you know, you guys basically invented or allowed for everything post the original series. Do you guys have things that you like, didn't like?
Favorites?
Fans all of it or not of it, all of it? Or?
Well, I really like Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's very controversial.
Not with me.
I think that is because Gene's, at that time, personal assistant was just
snarky asshole.
Good. Okay.
You know, I was trying to figure a nice way to say that, but he said
you don't have to do that on our show.
No.
Tell the truth.
This is, you know, and he told all of fandom every chance he got that Gene hated Deep Space Nine, didn't like the concept at all. Well, you know, Gene was not only still alive when it was pitched in the first place, but he was in his right mind. He was, you know, and a sensible person. He knew what was happening. And what he said about that was, things change.
Yeah.
And Star Trek is changing. And there's, you know, we have to just accept that. Now, if you want it to be all, and my comment come out of this, all daisies and you know, ragweed, then fine, you're all set for watching all of the series again. But if you're ready to be a little bit more liberal with your mind set there, you're going to enjoy most of it. Mm-hmm. I had trouble with Enterprise because the sets looked newer than the original. As it you know, it would have to, but and the same thing with Discovery. The biggest fault I find with Discovery is that it was not set in the future and was set in the past.
I don't understand. I thought the same thing, and I thought that, you know, I really don't know. The only thing I think that the issue there was at the time was the licensing issue, you know, the split with the movies being owned by one entity and the TV productions by another, and they're being stuck at the events of the J.J. Abrams movies and not being able to move forward, you know, unless they definitively decided to just disavow all of that.
Well, Abrams has a lot to answer for.
But I think that was their issue. I think they felt until, you know, they're past that now because they've reunified. But I think at the time they didn't want to move past the point where Spock went into the.
They were technically not allowed to.
Yeah, right. And that's what I'm saying. Now they're
the difference contractual things between Paramount and
CBS Viacom, yeah.
Massive.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the kind of thing that's going to keep both sides, their lawyers, just very happy because they're still untangling it.
Yeah.
And, you know, so yes, I can see where that would be a problem.
Yeah. I actually read an extensive thing about how Spock was legally owned by both. Because the original Spock, because he had appeared both in the movies, you know, those movies, and that there was, you know, there was no sorting out who owned Spock at that point. It was crazy.
Oh,
So-
this is. I mean, as I say, it's a lawyer's delight.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That situation,
So-
and fans don't really see or understand, or in some cases want to understand,
Right.
that there are just amazing differences there.
Yeah.
Well, and as fans, you shouldn't have to care about that stuff, right? The material should speak for itself. And I think, thankfully, I'll speak for all of us here. Like, I think for the most part, we've enjoyed all of it. I mean, of course, we have our little nits to pick, but we've been very pleased for the most part with everything that's come since the original series. So,
Yeah.
It's always good to have more Star Trek, and we're getting more continually. So happy to have it.
I mean, there's theoretically 6 actual things in production right now. So, no. Dave has said before, I'll give the clean version of this. Star Trek is like pizza. Some is better than another, but it's all good.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good.
Yeah. What other sci-fi current or past do you enjoy? I mean, I know you're fans of, written and any like franchises or stuff like that you're fans of.
Ooh, science fiction on well, not
TV,
so much
movies,
on TV.
whatever.
Movies, yes.
We're big. I mean, we love the Star Wars movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Whole different ball of wax than Star Trek, but
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
What a hoot! And the fact that there was another whole new universe showing up, out of the blue.
Yes.
We met Charlie Lippincott back when he was PR for Star Wars, and nobody figured that cockamamie thing was going to work. It's just too weird. And he had an office over at Universal. Don't ask me why. I thought it was Fox, but who knows? The office was barely as large as our dining room and had a desk and a couple of chairs in it. That was it. And over in one corner was a stack of photographs almost as tall as me. And that was the whole thing. He didn't even have a file cabinet. And he was
what time period was that? That was before the movie came out, or
before the movie.
Maggie Thompson was out for Comic-Con, and was Don Thompson alive then? Gosh, I don't know.
Don had died by then. And she said, "I'm going to meet this guy who's doing publicity for a new science fiction movie, and you should come with me because it looks pretty interesting."
Well, any chance to visit any studio, I always have fun, So we said, sure. And we went over and we met this very thrilled person who someone was paying attention to him. And I thought, what are these other people doing? And then we started seeing the photos. And oh my goodness. And I mean, we went through most of that stack. And it was so amazing.
And then at a convention before the first film was released, they had models and examples of costumes and so on. And they had Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher there. And we got to talking with Mark, and we said, we run this media convention, Equicon, and we'd love to invite you as a guest. And he said, wow, I could come as a guest? Little bell went off. We went back and looked in our printout of our attendance at the previous one, and there was Mark Hamill.
Oh, he's a big fan, yeah.
Are you talking about San Diego '76? Because it's pretty famously known that they attended there and really pushed the movie the year before it came out at San Diego.
Yeah.
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, you guys were there for that too? That's awesome.
This is, again, history. It's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, well, honey, I mean, I sometimes tell people we're older than everybody else here. Put together. Which is a famous line, of course, from Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
So that story reminded me of another story I would like you to tell, and we're running out of time here, but can you tell the story about the auction of Star Trek props you guys did at a convention?
So we were going to bring the foremost science fiction fan in Japan over to the Worldcon in 1968. Yeah. So we're trying to run, we're trying to run a campaign, get donations and so on to do it. And we're falling pretty short. So we said to Gene on one of our visits, we're going to try to do a fundraising thing at the Worldcon in New York the year after the one in Pittsburgh or Cleveland where we did the initial showing. And, do you think you could donate some stuff from Star Trek? And he said, yeah, we could probably round up some stuff.
Well, we figured a couple of scripts, right?
So we get to the convention, and the convention committee is kind of hostile to the whole idea. So they
we're
said,
paying more attention to a TV show than to books.
Yeah.
No.
So they said, there's about 6 boxes of stuff in the hotel receiving department. You need to go down and get it.
I mean, who could send us 6 boxes of something?
And we went down, and here are 6 boxes from Desilu.
The boxes alone would be worth a fortune.
Oh my God, my heart is already
cardboard boxes. Desilu.
Yeah. So we opened them up. We're looking at these things, and there's scripts.
Autographed. His secretary had gone around and gotten autographs from everybody on all these scripts.
There's all sorts of stills. There's
one of Kirk's
Spock ears. There's the Kirk
right off of Nimoy.
There's the Kirk shirt from Amok Time.
With the rip in it?
Yeah.
Man.
Another shirt of some sort. And there are these little fuzzy balls.
Oh, the Trimbles.
You mean these right here?
And
were those up there?
We had no clue what those were.
The episode hadn't aired yet.
Oh, the episode hadn't aired yet. Oh, my
Okay.
God.
And we met David Gerald at that convention, and he says, your name's Trimble? Oh, I think I've caused you a world of hurt.
Oh, that's great.
Oh.
So this is actually, we each have one of these, and these are actually from Deep Space Nine. These are from
from the
Trials and Tribulations.
Trials and Tribulations. We bought them in an auction.
Yeah, we bought these in an auction. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I know you know Brian well, but Dave, Todd, and I are all prop collectors and original memorabilia collectors. So just to know that you had your hands on that stuff back then is amazing.
Phenomenal.
And I bet it went for pennies compared to what it would go for now.
Comparatively. But then we were not given a good time for the auction.
We were told we're going to give you a room in the basement at the hotel, and you're going to be on at midnight.
Oh, God. See, that's times have changed.
Yeah, boy, is this going to be terrible. So we get down there. Now, the room in the basement was actually a function room of the hotel, and it was set up like a theater. There's a stage, and there's rows of seats going up theater style. And we figured, okay, well, if we get a couple dozen people there, we can probably...
We didn't figure we'd take all of the stuff out of all of the boxes. Obviously, we're not going to have enough people to bother with that.
So...
the room kept filling up.
The room was absolutely crammed. There were people sitting on the steps. There were people leaning against walls and so on.
They were filling the entire apron in front of the stage.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a sea of eager fans. It was like, okay, I wonder if they can come through with enough money to get us this van over from Japan. And the auction started, and it was insatiable. It was absolutely amazing.
And we had wonderful things happen. Gene had sent the original treatment he'd done to sell the show.
One of about 14 of them,
Yeah.
by the way.
But we didn't know that. And so we, I held it up and I said, okay, here's, the original treatment to sell the show to the network. What am I offered? And somebody jumped up and said, wait, that should go to the Smithsonian. And he said, I said, well, okay, but we're trying to raise money for this. I want everybody, he gets a hat, and he says, I want everybody to put money in this hat. And he said, we'll use that money to send it to the Smithsonian. We got, I think, probably $300 in that hat.
It was more than that.
It may have been more than that.
But yeah. And they didn't seem to be stopped throwing money at us. I mean, it was just amazing. So whoever got all of this stuff, I hope they're still treasuring it because, it's...
That's great.
And even the Trimbles went and people didn't know what they were?
What?
People didn't know what the Trimbles were, but they bought them anyway.
But since we threw in a script with it, they...
Oh, okay.
Willing, to take a chance.
Wow, that is terrific.
Now, later on, Irving Feinberg was the prop man on the original series. And everybody was sort of afraid of him because he wouldn't let you play with the props. And in fact, Robert Lansing from
Yes, yeah, Enterprise.
he was sitting there playing with the little servo.
Yep.
And Irving walked up and grabbed it out of his hand and played with this and walked up. And Robert Lansing said, can he do that? And everybody goes, yeah, he can. Yeah. So Irving gave me 3 real Trimbles.
That's great.
And I tried to walk off the stage with him. And everybody said, Irving's going to get you. Don't. You need to put those back. And I finally went back and I said, will you write me a note that says I can take these off stage? So, yeah. And the reason you can tell Trimbles that are handmade, and David had his people make them this way.
David was smart. He went to Paramount right away and got the rights to sell Trimbles.
Okay.
And so he licensed Trimbles, and with the result that he could legally sell Trimbles. He ran a mail order business with employing a couple of fans to run it for him that essentially supported him while he was breaking into the science fiction field at large.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, paid for his house. So, but
his Trimbles were very lovingly crafted.
Yeah, the fans made them for him. And
whereas the Trimbles that were from the show were essentially some squares of fur, fake fur, with a bunch of sponge rubber things tossed into them and hot glued.
Really?
Interesting.
Well, that was the fastest. You could just hold that and just hot glue this sucker and then close it up and tuck in the corners. And so it's very rare to find one made like that anymore.
And during the filming of the show, when Kirk is standing down there getting Trimbles raining on him, well, he's in a box. They tried doing it flat, and the Trimbles would bounce off and bounce. So they finally got him in a box with a bunch of crumpled newspapers around him, and they're throwing Trimbles down out of this hatch.
You'd imagine how much fun the crew people.
Yeah, they were having a lot of fun.
I'm sure.
Believe me, that thing where he says somebody close this hatch is really heartfelt. That wasn't acting.
Yeah, I can imagine Bill not taking that too kindly after a while.
Yeah.
Well, he was to give him credit where credit is due. He was under a great deal of stress because he was about to divorce his wife. Now, this is something that women are supposed to divorce their husbands. Husbands, not so much. and especially people who are in the news. And the studio came down on him pretty hard that we keep this very much under wraps. And
there were a number of issues there, and I frankly think most of the right was on his side, but any rate.
Yeah.
So well, he did it a few more times. So
yeah, he did it a few more times.
Yeah, we love Bill. We actually
he's definitely we've met him a bunch of times.
Yeah, and we saw him last year at a convention, and he's still telling great stories and still doing his thing.
Oh yeah, he's fun.
He's even more fun now that he's got a sense of humor.
Yeah,
yeah. I got to say that I think each time he's lightened up just a little bit more and a little bit more, and I think he's he's kind of just riding the Shatner show, to its inevitable conclusion and just enjoying himself.
Yeah,
that's wonderful to see. We helped him sell souvenirs at his horse show.
Oh.
And his horse show is actually fundraiser for A Head with Horses.
Yep.
And so we cheerfully, a bunch of us sold gimme caps and T-shirts and so on. And we were rather aggressive about it because they handed us several large boxes open with T-shirts, and they said, we'd really like to sell all of these. I don't think they believed it was going to happen. Yeah, it happened. We sold out. Between my kids and me rushing out in front of people and saying, do you know how good you're going to look in this shirt?
Nothing beats marketing talent.
Yeah, he asked the right person to do it.
And Catherine, of course.
Yeah.
We have a mentally handicapped daughter, and Catherine has this very appealing face. And when she asks you to buy something, it's really hard to say no. And then when you say yes, she giggles in the most engaging way possible. So it's worth it, for that. And she sold the most improbable people a T-shirt. When you have a woman walking around, because she dressed for a real horse show, in high heels and a fur and, pearls and all of this, and Catherine sold her a T-shirt.
There you go.
Oh, well. So the family's been involved in Star Trek ever since, really.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So I have a thank you for you that's 45 years overdue, okay? I want to say one of the things that I really appreciated when I was younger was when I got my concordance. When I get this one, yep.
This one.
Okay.
This was the one I've had since I was 11.
My original one disintegrated. Dave actually replaced mine for me. But you pretty much settled a playground argument for me, because I insisted that the animated series was real Star Trek, and that it was in the concordance was my proof. You legitimized that. You legitimized that for me.
Thank you.
The only time that the line "Beam me up, Scotty" was said was in the animated.
Yeah, it's where James T. Kirk's middle name came from. There's significant things in there that have been carried forward.
Well, in fact, Sula's first name.
Yes. But exactly.
The thing is that I had nothing to say about it until they moved, in an episode over to from the animation.
Yep.
And boom, that made it legit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
No arguing with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the first Star Trek book I ever had. It is I am a person who keeps things. I've had this copy for 45 years. I'm very happy to still have it. So I'll have to send it to Brian so he can have you autograph
I think
it
both
sometime.
of these are going to make their way to Brian.
Sure. You get them to Brian. He'll get them to us. We'll autograph them.
That would be.
Hopefully, Brian will get them back to you guys.
Yeah.
He's good about that.
He is good about that kind of stuff. We like Brian.
So,
he is.
We have not kept most of our souvenirs from Star Trek because, frankly, they're worth more going out to a charity auction.
Yes.
And if we started collecting things, what everything would look like. We still have.
Yeah, we know, because that's our house, as you can see.
Still, at our house, expecting the living room to look like the USS Enterprise, and Laura would have none of that. So, but I have a million. I want to say what is the platinum?
Yeah. Oh, gold press platinum.
No, I have the brick.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
That was given to me off the set.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And Paramount was really terrible when that show closed. They were going around into people's trailers and removing every single little thing that they had kept. Chase got very sneaky and went out and walked off the set and off the lot from the side gate with the box full of her goodies and put them in a friend's car. But nobody else knew to do that until they found out.
It's so interesting how that pendulum would swing, because there's so many people that, like, from the next generation grabbed great stuff out of a dumpster. Okay. And then by the time that Deep Space Nine happened, everything was locked down like it was gold.
No.
And
Richard Arnold wouldn't walk across the lot with me because I'm a firm dumpster diver, but I have been forbidden to do that, so I would get him to do it.
Yeah.
And since he was very prissy, that really upset him a whole lot. But he knew I was going to keep at him until he did it. So
I'm sure you guys have heard this kind of a famous story, but Ron Moore took all of the ships out of
the ships from the briefing room.
Picard's ready room, and then when they went to make the movie, they asked him if they could borrow them because
when they made the final episode, when they made
he pulled those out of a dumpster.
Yeah, he rented them back to them.
If it hits the dumpster, as far as I'm concerned, it's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
That's but and then and I mentioned it to one of the people at Paramount. If you wanted to auction off the entire set of Deep Space Nine, you could pay for another burn unit in hospital.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, we can't be bothered. There'd be too much trouble letting people on the lot and so on." I said, "Well, have them pay a pretty hefty upfront fee to do it."
Yeah.
Come on, other people manage that kind of thing.
Sure.
So,
Well, and that stuff ends up in the big Hollywood auctions now, and all those costumes and all those props go for a fortune.
I know.
There's some in this box right here.
Yeah. It is one of those things where it was like I don't think they were ever comfortable. Paramount was ever super comfortable with Star Trek. I think that there was management that never understood it, and it wasn't where it was an oddity to them, and so through the corporate offices they never fully appreciated what they had. And
also, Gene was such a loose cannon. He really was.
Yep.
And because even in the early concept of this was that the division wasn't down the middle on men and women aboard the ship. It was very much closer to a quarter women and 3/4 men, because, as he said, that many women could certainly service all the males aboard the ship, and everybody's going, And I think, I think that half the time he said these things just
to pull chains.
Yeah.
Well, you guys knew him. We've only read about him, and we've
only heard the stories. So
we've done our fair share. I mean, the three of us a couple years back did the full 50th anniversary audiobook series, which was like 20 something hours, Todd?
60.
It was like 50 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, 50 hours. We listened to every minute of it. So like we've had our
50-year mission lessons. That was we listened to the audiobook version of that, which is you are mentioned prominently.
Yes, but I mean he was an infamous character.
Who wrote
this is Edward Gross and Mark Altman. So this is two volumes. That's 2 volumes that on the 50th anniversary.
They've never sent us a book. Mark?
We recommend it to anybody who, the book is good, the audiobook is really good, and there's an enormous amount of information there. So
Mark Cushman has always sent us his books when he comes.
Which are fantastic. Brian turned us on to those, and I let myself read it basically a chapter a night, and so I'm not sucking it up too fast. And they're fantastic.
The voluminous amount of pages
God,
this guy
the
writes
detail,
is just
and it's
ridiculous.
like, yeah.
He's prolific.
And it's one of these
sure.
things where I have been a fan since I was, I remember watching the third season first run. Okay. I'm of that age, and I've been a fan my entire life. I learn new things every page I turn in those Cushman books. So, really, really great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the show, and we could certainly do this
thank you for inviting us.
It's an honor to meet you guys who have
really
touched our lives so broadly. To my son, who's a Star Trek fan, and we have you in part to thank for that. So we can certainly not thank you enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
We do appreciate that.
So Brian, again, we can't thank you enough for setting that up and for introducing us to them, because we said it during the interview, but we've known who these people are for a long time and never would have thought we would have ever gotten to meet them, let alone find out one of our friends knows them.
Oh, and just great. And they're just really nice people. And, and again, this is one of the things where they are fans to the very core. And they're the kind of people that, again, are the backbone of the fan communities in anything around the world. They're not people that just, ever wanted to get rich off this. They just love it, and they've supported it their whole lives. And
they are super fans. We scratched the surface. We didn't even talk about the conventions they ran and the authors they know. Yeah. I mean, Laura, their daughter, was in a science fiction class. They're doing a book report on Ray Bradbury. And she goes, can I skip the book report and just bring Ray Bradbury to the class?
Oh my God!
So that's what she did. She just called up Ray and said, "Can you come to talk to my science fiction class?"
They totally stole that scene for what's the
Rodney Excellent Adventure?
No, Rodney Dangerfield. He's supposed to do a book
back to school.
Back to school. He's supposed to do a book report on Kurt Vonnegut, and he brings Kurt Vonnegut.
That's funny.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah, and they're in their 80s. I'm right, Brian?
Yeah.
They're in their 80s?
Yeah.
And they're sharp. They're sharp as
tacks. Sharp as a tack.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No,
they remember everything. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. They were great.
Yeah, they were.
Super
You know who's also awesome?
Please extend
my collectibles.
Yes.
And Boy Collectibles.
They
are awesome.
It's a pleasure to mention them on every show, not only because they're our sponsor, but we're also customers. Tons of hot toy announcements coming out of the San Diego Virtual Con. Hot toys, Wonder Woman, Iron Man from freaking Mysterio thing, Tony Stark mechanic, Cable, all kinds of stuff. Statues and pops and hot toys and sideshow and Kodabukiyas and everything you need. Check them out.
And speaking of Star Trek, there's a really fun bust of Picard covering his eyes and holding his head in his hands.
Yes, the Picard hand of shame.
That's funny.
The face, they call it the face palm Picard.
Yep.
It's great.
It's terrific.
But check those guys out at filmboycollectibles.com. And thank you again, Brian. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
It was
awesome.
fun.
Yeah, I felt like, it's awesome to talk to them, and I'm sort of watching the clock, but I mean, I could totally sit here for 3 hours.
Oh, we definitely could have gone longer, but it was great.
I had a list of questions, and so did Todd.
Yeah.
That we didn't do any of them, and we didn't need to. They just really just told us,
Brian told us at the onset, he's like, you could ask one question and they could answer it for 5 minutes or for 30 minutes. And
that's terrific. And again,
they've got great stories.
6 decades into this stuff, and the enthusiasm that they still have is fantastic. Yeah. So that's great.
Awesome. So thank you.
Brian, when you see them again, please express our gratitude one more time for us.
I will do that. And I'll get your book signed. No problem.
And have them sign the books that we mailed you.
Yeah. I also just want to make sure
I feel like I have to
mine
track one
gets
down
back
now.
to me, because this is one of my family heirlooms. Todd, I bought at a convention.
Your name isn't written in 7-year-old handwriting.
It's not.
That's okay. Mine can be distinguished because it says purchased at a USPS auction.
Oh, that's right. Yours is in better shape than mine, actually.
Yeah.
But
I need to track one down to send it to you, Brian, because now I want a signed one too.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
I don't know where mine is, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go on eBay. I'm gonna go find one.
I actually was on Amazon, and you can buy copies of the original ones that they mimeographed for like $15.
Really?
People are selling them. But this one has a special place in my heart. And
yeah, of course.
I had to replace the little thing with the wheel because I've used it so much. But anyway, thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.